And here we go. All right, so 1-3 notes today. We're going to be talking about linear inequalities. We're going to solve them, and we are going to graph them. Okay? And we're going to solve singleton ones, and we're also going to solve compound inequalities. So again, for purposes of today, if you haven't answered the question of the day, Samsung or iPhone, make sure that that goes in the chat. I also am monitoring the chat too, so that I can see if you have a question in there, and hopefully I will be better at watching, making sure that I always check after every example. I'll check. And again, too, if you want to unmute, that's fine too. Okay? All right, so here we go. First thing we should talk about is what the inequalities are. So there are 5 inequalities. Okay? The first one is less than, and that's that one. Okay? Sometimes you called it an alligator. You might have called it an alligator and a crocodile. Less than and greater than are those. And then there's the less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Okay? Those are the 4 most common. And then we also have not equal to. And I don't care which way your slash goes through your equal sign. We'll rarely use that one because we're algebraical and we want to be equals. Okay? So good there. Okay? You've seen them. We've dealt with them before. You've been dealing with them for years. So the graphing part of the inequalities. Okay? We graph, for this one, we're going to graph just on a number line. And the graph on that number line is going to have 2 different parts. The first part is going to be a dot, and that dot is either going to be open, if it's just the less than or greater than symbol, or we're going to close that dot, fill it in, if you will, if we have the or equal to component to go along with that. Okay? So we've got open or closed dots, and those will normally be either on or above that particular number that you're dealing with on the number line. The second part of a graph for an inequality is the arrow, and I ask that be above the number line, and you'll see why here in a minute. Okay? So if I had, oops, tap the brakes. I guess I can't. Okay? Apparently I gotta scroll down a little bit. Or we'll just go here. There we go. Okay? So if I take this and let's say that I go with x is less than 12. That's our final answer in our inequality, and we want to graph that. Now, ideally, we would start with a number line, and the only thing that I care about on that number line is the number 12. Okay? That's the only part I care about. If you want to add more numbers, that is totally up to you. That is not up to me. Okay? I only care about that number 12. Okay? So since it's less than, I'm going to go with an open dot. Okay? There. And I'm less than tells me that I'm going to go to the left because smaller numbers are on the left, bigger numbers are on the right. Okay? That's one way of graphing that one. Another way of graphing that same thing is, again, I'm only caring about 12, and then I would have my dot above 12 and my arrow going that way. Those are the two acceptable ways to do that. Because the reason is, and I've done this many, many times, is that what I don't want to see is this. Okay? I just put x is less than 12 on that number line, but I can't distinguish it because I used one color. If you're going to do that, if you're going to not go above the line with your arrows, you need to use a second color, and you need to make it distinguishable. Okay? So this be bad. Okay? Because we can't distinguish it. Okay? All right, let's dive into doing some actual inequalities. The first thing we need to do when we actually get into inequalities is that inequalities are solved the exact same way that an equality is, with the exception of one very important rule, and that rule is that if we multiply or divide by a negative number, and only if we multiply or divide by a negative number, not if we have a negative number, if we multiply or divide by a negative number, we need to flip that inequality. So if we can see my shadow or my hand, if it's less than, it becomes greater than. Okay, we flip it right around. If it's less than or equal to, it becomes greater than or equal to. We flip that one right around, and likewise vice versa. Okay? Very important, and I can guarantee you at some point in time you're going to forget this, and then you're going to go back and you're going to say, duh, I forgot to flip my inequality. Okay? Make sure we do that. Okay? So, solve and graph these. Okay? So, same as what we were doing with algebraic ones. If I am, here I want to get x by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Okay? So when I divide by 4, I get x here. My sign does not flip in this case because I am dividing by a positive number. So my sign stays greater than or equal to 24 divided by 4 is 6. So there is my inequality. X is greater than or equal to 6. Now what I have to do is I have to graph that. So the only number that I care about is 6. If you want to put more on there, totally fine, but that's the only number that I care about. Closed dot going to the right, because I want to be bigger. The alligator eats the bigger numbers. Okay? So x is the bigger number. I want all the bigger ones. And that is my 2 answers for this particular problem. Okay? Checking the chat, I see no questions. Okay. 8 minus x is greater than 17. So I would subtract 8. That gives me negative x is greater than 9. I would divide by -1. I am dividing by a negative, ding, ding, ding. Okay? So my sign is going to flip from greater than to less than because I am dividing by a negative. And x is going to be less than -9. Number line for that. Open circle. Whoops, tap the brakes. Wrong color. One below it. Open circle. Going to the left. Questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, anyone? On my limited screen, because I'm got presenting and limiting the chat or watching the chat, I see a couple head shakers that there's a no on that one. So let's go on to the next one. They get, they can become a little more complicated, and that's fine. We still do them the exact same way. And we just might have to have a few more steps in here. So here I would subtract 2. That gives me 10 is less than or equal to -4x. I would then divide by -4. Ding, ding, ding. Dividing by a negative is going to switch my sign to a greater than or equal to. 10 divided by -4, both 10 and 4 can be divided by 2. So that gives me -5 halves here. And that gives me x over here. And I am just fine with fractions again. Okay? I actually like the fraction here because that's the only number that I care about. So that number can also go on my number line as -5 halves. Okay? And so I want -5 halves to be the biggest number on there. Alligator is eating the bigger one, so that's going to be a closed dot and an arrow going to the left. Fractions are our friends. Okay. Not food. If you go back to stealing the Finding Nemo line, fish are friends, not food. Moving on to the next one, 5x minus 6 is less than or equal to 5 times the quantity x plus 1. If I distribute this 5 into that side, then I get 5x minus 6 less than or equal to 5x plus 5. Subtracting 5x from both sides, I get -6 is less than or equal to 5. Whoa, what happened to my x's? They're all gone. However, then if that's the case, if all of my x's disappear, all my variables disappear, then I look at this equation right there and I say to myself, self, is that true or is that false? Is -6 smaller than 5? And the answer to that is yes, it is. So this is a true statement. So this is an all real numbers case. Or if you wanted to, the symbol for all real numbers is that. The graph, because it said solve and graph, the graph is, I take my number line and I throw any old number on there. I'm just going to throw 0 on there because it's the middle of the middle numbers. Okay? And then I draw my arrow all the way across. Okay? If my blue final statement here was a false statement, okay, then my answer would be no solution, and my number line would just be, I would just have the number line, I wouldn't have an extra arrow on it. Okay. Questions, comments, clarifications on that? Again, chat me or unmute yourselves. Totally cool with that. Okay. Compound inequalities. Okay. The only difference between this is now you're going to have 2 inequalities in one problem. You're never going to have more than 2 inequalities in the same problem. Okay? Now, this one here on the left is an AND statement. And in an AND statement, both parts, come on, stop lagging on me. Both parts must be true. Okay. The graph is going to look like a luggage handle. Okay? Or a handle on something. Okay? That's what it's going to look like. Okay. The other one, I know you're going to be shocked at this, the other one over here is an OR statement because it's got an OR in it. Okay? So it's an OR statement, and that one or the other one has to be true, and this graph is going to look like you're rowing a boat. For those of you that know, I'm a Minnesota guy. Our head coach is for football is PJ Fleck, and normally I'd be talking to you right now about RTBing, rowing the boat. Okay, Sky U Ma, go Gophers. Okay, but we're on hold. Okay, so if I were to actually do these problems, now on my number line, now I've got 2 numbers that I care about. I care about -4 and I care about +8. I'm going to be a closed dot at -4 because of the equals component. I'm going to be an open dot at +8, and I'm going to go in between them. The two numbers that I care about over here are 3 and 7. What's up? Okay. Now, one thing that you will have is when you're going through and you're doing an OR statement, okay, your numbers might be in reversed order. Okay? You always, on your number line, want the smaller of the two numbers on the left and the larger of the two numbers on the right. Okay? Open at 3 and going to, because we're smaller than that, open at 7 and we want bigger than 7. So those two are the solutions, the graphs to those compound inequalities. Oops, no, I missed out on that one. Okay. Let's put them to work. Let's do 2 of them. Okay? So now, when you're dealing with an AND type 1, instead of doing what you do on one side, you do on the other, because now I've got 3 parts. So what I do in one part, I want to get rid of that 5. I've got to do on all parts. Okay? So what I do in one part, I've got to do on all parts. So then here now, -10 minus 5, is not -5. It is -15 is less than 3x is less than 3. 8 minus 5 is 3. Next, I would divide all parts by 3. And here again, if I'm dividing by a negative number, I would flip both of those inequalities. Okay? And so that's going to give me -5 is less than x is less than 1. As my answer, my number line, I care about -5 and I care about 1. Open at -5, open at 1, and it's going to be in between them. I need to be smaller than 1 and bigger than -5, so I'm going to be in between them. And that is my answer. Check the chat. Nobody else. Okay, good there. In an OR case, you're going to work them separately. So you're going to work just this one. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. That's going to give me 2x is less than or equal to -6. Then I'm going to divide by 2. And that's going to give me x is less than, oops, apparently I didn't kick off on that one. X is less than or equal to -3. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the other one. And now I'm going to work this one. I'm going to subtract 3. And that's going to give me 4x is greater than or equal to 4. Divide both sides by 4. that's going to give me x is greater than or equal to 1. Then I bring them back in the same line. X is less than or equal to -3, or x is greater than or equal to 1 as my final statement. And then I put that on a number line. The two numbers that I care about are -3 is smaller than 1, so it's going to go on the left. Closed dot at -3, I want to be smaller. Closed dot at 1, I want to be bigger. And there we go. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. If you've checked out the It's Learning page, there is a worksheet up for today's, or this week I should say, and you can do now week 2 worksheet. After this one, you can do numbers 3 through 6. Okay? After that. One thing that I will tell you is that please, 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 when you're submitting your homework, please look and see that your picture is clear. If you can't read the picture in your document, I can't read it. Retake it before you submit it. Okay? Please make sure that I can see your work and that you can see the actual, it's not blurry, there's not a big shade going over it or something like that. Okay? Again, if you haven't already, make sure today's question for attendance was Samsung or iPhone. Put that in the chat. If you're watching this after the fact, send me an email with Samsung or iPhone, and then that will tell me that you were here today. Okay? I will be around in this chat until 10 o'clock, or excuse me, till 11 o'clock. It already is 10 o'clock. Until 11 o'clock. And so if you have any questions, feel free to do that. If not, if you're one of the people that need to take last week's formative, do that right now. If you need to submit last week's homework, do that right now. So yeah, otherwise, if you don't have any questions, I'm done. We'll see you later. Thanks for playing along.